The sound of distant thunder echoes across the plains of Eastern Europe, but it's not weather. It's the sound of tanks, missiles, and the shifting gears of war. For months, the front lines in Ukraine seemed locked in a deadly stalemate. But tonight something unprecedented has happened. Belarus, long a silent ally of Moscow, just made a move that could change everything. And this single decision may alter not only the fate of Ukraine, but the entire balance of power in Eastern Europe. In the early hours before dawn, Belarusian armored units began redeploying not toward Ukraine's border, as expected, but away from Russian command zones. Something was wrong, or perhaps something new was being set in motion. Reports from Minsk suggest a political earthquake has struck Belarus. President Alexander Lukashenko, once Putin's most loyal ally, has been under immense pressure from his own military, from sanctions, and from the growing unrest among Belarusians who are tired of being dragged into a war they never wanted. And now, sources claim Lukashenko's government has made a shocking internal decision, one that may change the course of the Ukraine conflict forever. For years, Lukashenko walked a dangerous tightrope, balancing between Moscow's demands and his own survival. He allowed Russian troops to use Belarusian territory to invade Ukraine from the north in 2022. But that decision came at a heavy cost. Belarus became internationally isolated. Sanctions crippled its economy. And perhaps most dangerously, parts of his own military began questioning his loyalty to Belarus itself. Now, with Russia weakened on the front lines and Ukrainian counterattacks growing stronger, Lukashenko seems to have made a calculation. If Russia falls, Belarus falls with it. But if Belarus changes sides, even slightly, it might survive. According to intelligence leaks shared with European defense networks, Belarus is preparing for a strategic neutrality move, a coded phrase meaning it may restrict Russian access to bases and logistic hubs within its borders. In simpler terms, Putin's northern gateway to Ukraine may soon close. In Moscow, this development has triggered chaos behind closed doors. The Kremlin's response has been swift, deploying FSB advisors to Minsk, increasing surveillance of Belarusian military units, and reportedly calling Lukashenko several times within 48 hours. Putin, sources say, feels betrayed. After all, Belarus was his most dependable satellite state, the buffer zone that gave Russia a sense of strategic depth against NATO. If Belarus breaks away now, the Russian front in Ukraine becomes even more exposed. Ukraine's northern flank, once a dormant front, could suddenly turn into a launch pad for Kyiv's new counteroffensives. Analysts believe this could force Moscow to reallocate thousands of troops, weakening their already stretched positions in Donetsk, Zaporizhia, and the Kherson fronts. This is not just a political shift. It's a potential military disaster for Russia. While Moscow panics, Western intelligence agencies are watching closely and quietly celebrating. For months, NATO officials have been signaling openness to Belarusian defection. The logic is simple. If Belarus steps out of Moscow's shadow, the Kremlin loses one of its most vital logistics corridors. Recently, U.S. and Polish officials held undisclosed meetings in Warsaw, reportedly attended by mid-level Belarusian defense representatives. The agenda: economic guarantees, energy assistance, and gradual normalization in exchange for reducing Russian access to Belarusian infrastructure. In other words, Belarus may be bargaining its way back into the global fold. And this move isn't purely symbolic. NATO's eastern flank, stretching from Poland to Lithuania, could gain a new buffer zone if Belarus decides to stay neutral or turn westward. That means less threat to NATO's borders and more breathing room for Ukraine to regroup and advance. Satellite imagery from Western defense analysts shows unusual patterns. Belarusian brigades, once stationed near Homel and Mazer, key staging areas used by Russia in 2022, are being repositioned northward and westward. Meanwhile, Russian logistics convoys in Belarus appear stranded, with reports of restricted access to fuel and storage facilities. This suggests that Minsk is tightening control, deliberately cutting the arteries that once pumped supplies to Russian troops near the Ukrainian border. Furthermore, sources in the Belarusian army claim that several officers have refused to coordinate with Russian command structures. a quiet rebellion may already be underway. Ukraine's General Staff, in its latest briefing, confirmed, "We are observing a reduction of Russian logistics operations from Belarusian territory. This development is favorable for our northern security. Behind the military theater lies the real game economics." Belarus's economy, long strangled by sanctions, is on the edge of collapse. Factories are shutting down and energy shortages are growing. But a backdoor deal could change that. Reports suggest that the European Union may offer Belarus partial sanction relief if it demonstrates independence from Moscow. That's the ultimate temptation for Lukashenko's survival. For a man who has ruled for nearly 3 decades through political cunning and force, this could be his final play, abandoning a sinking ally to save his own regime. And if that happens, the impact on the Ukraine war could be seismic. So what does this mean for the battlefield? If Belarus cuts off Russian access, Moscow loses its northern airfields for drone and missile launches. Supply chains carrying ammunition, fuel, and armor from Russian depots in Smolensk and Bryansk will slow drastically. Russia's ability to threaten Kyiv from the north vanishes, allowing Ukraine to reallocate divisions southward, where major offensives continue. This strategic relief could boost Ukrainian morale and effectiveness, giving them freedom to strike deeper into occupied territories. In essence, Belarus's decision may gift Kyiv a major advantage, one it's been waiting for since the first days of the war. But Putin won't give up Belarus easily. Already, Russia is deploying hybrid tactics, cyber attacks on Belarusian infrastructure, disinformation campaigns, and covert operations aimed at keeping Minsk under control. There are also unconfirmed reports that Russian special units have crossed into Belarus under the guise of training missions. Their real objective, to prevent defections within Belarusian ranks and secure strategic bases. Lukashenko, paranoid as ever, has reportedly increased his own security. The Kremlin has eyes everywhere, and betrayal comes with consequences. Inside Belarus, the atmosphere is electric. Civilians who once protested against Lukashenko in 2020 are watching the situation unfold with cautious optimism. Social media platforms are flooded with messages of Belarus for Belarusians and calls to cut ties with Russia entirely. For them, this isn't just geopolitics, it's a chance for national redemption. If Lukashenko indeed pivots westward, he may finally face the paradox of his own rule. To save himself, he must empower the very people he once suppressed. The Ukraine war has been full of surprises, from failed offensives to unexpected alliances. But this latest move by Belarus could redefine the conflict entirely. For Ukraine, it means breathing room, momentum, and potential victory in the long run. For Russia, it's a nightmare, losing its northern leverage, its trusted ally, and the illusion of regional dominance. And for the world, it's a reminder that in modern warfare, the front lines are not just drawn by missiles or tanks, but by shifting loyalties and desperate leaders fighting to survive another day. Western capitals are already calculating the next phase. If Belarus truly distances itself, other Russian partners like Armenia or Kazakhstan might follow suit. This could signal the gradual unraveling of Moscow's influence across the former Soviet space. In that case, what started as a war for territory may end as a collapse of an empire. So tonight, as tanks reposition and air defenses go silent across Belarus, one truth becomes clear. This is not just a local maneuver, it's the turning of a tide. A country long overshadowed by Moscow may have just rewritten the map of this war. And the world is watching, holding its breath, as the balance of power in Eastern Europe begins to shift once again. Steel and power, strength, strategy, superiority. The sound of distant thunder echoes across the plains of Eastern Europe, but it's not weather. It's the sound of tanks, missiles, and the shifting gears of war. For months, the front lines in Ukraine seemed locked in a deadly stalemate. But tonight something unprecedented has happened. Belarus, long a silent ally of Moscow, just made a move that could change everything. And this single decision may alter not only the fate of Ukraine, but the entire balance of power in Eastern Europe. In the early hours before dawn, Belarusian armored units began redeploying not toward Ukraine's border, as expected, but away from Russian command zones. Something was wrong, or perhaps something new was being set in motion. Reports from Minsk suggest a political earthquake has struck Belarus. President Alexander Lukashenko, once Putin's most loyal ally,